So we are, as we said, we've released these drafts, this set of documents, out for public comment. And the working groups are reviewing the comments, and we hope in the next couple weeks, smile, 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 to be releasing these documents formally and finally. This is, and I love the slide that Stuart had on the development track of standards. We are, if you think about where we started just a couple of years ago with regards to Altmetrics, we were very, very low at the start of that process. Actually, some of the initial feedback when we started this project was, it's too soon, we don't need standards for this. We're going to inhibit innovation and development here. I think we've proven that not to be the case. But there is certainly a lot more work that we need to do in this space. So I want to pitch a couple questions. We'll have certainly a lot of time for questions as we move forward, so think about them. But one quick question I had for each of you. What would you say was the most contentious issue or problem that you faced in the last 18 months as we've been working on this?
Are these on?
Yeah, they're on.
So for us, it was definitely scope. So where you draw the boundaries, right? So a code of conduct, there's sort of two dimensions to that. So what it should contain, what being a good actor looks like, and also what we could reasonably hope or expect the community to adhere to. As I said, we're dealing with Jason Premium Impact Story. I can call up and say, Jason, you need to do this, or the community wants you to do this. I can't do that to Twitter, right? So there's a huge range of actors we have to deal with. And so figuring out, given the levers that we had available to us, what we could reasonably expect to foist upon the community.
Go ahead.
Yeah, other areas that are kind of tricky with this is issues around things like definitions and knowing kind of, well, there are a bunch of guys, they're doing things in different ways. And as Greg said, they've got to be able to innovate. They're doing this. It's a new area. There are new boundaries being done. There's new ways that people are doing things. And the standards aren't there to kind of limit that. Okay, it's about having something which is allowing that flexibility, but we're trying to answer some questions to drive some more confidence in the data there so that it helps the adoption. And one of the things is that when you're doing this, you want it to be something where it is an encouragement for the providers to take part in it. That this isn't a stick, it's got to be something which, actually, they're going to see some benefit from it. And so it is a two-way piece, that we're not just trying to say, this is an onerous task that we're going to put on top of people. It's going to be, actually, no, this is going to help people use what we do. And so we're trying to find that balance is always a tricky one, but we hope and that's why we haven't made the commitment to saying, it's going to work like this, and you've got to do this, that, and t'other. It's just, this is just the starting point. And if the community says, we want you to take that approach, then that will drive it the right way, we hope.
I think for our group, it was because we were developing the glossary. I mean, it was really trying to create the definitions that, not really that everyone could agree upon, because I think it was a really nice coalescence of different points of view, but really just say, how do you define scholarly output? It's a moving target, right? So could a tweet be scholarly output? So really trying to look at what's happening now and allow for continued evolution. So I think it wasn't really contentious, but we must have changed. I mean, it was so much work to try to be inclusive, right, but not to be restrictive.
And also, just adding on some of the definition things, we also looked at other industries, for example, the media industry, and the Media Ratings Council has released some information about sort of social media metrics and advice for advertisers on it. They're spending billions on the stuff. They still don't know how to define things like engagement through social media. So we're not alone at not necessarily knowing these things at the moment, and the world's still being discovered on it. But we hope that it's helping to get there at some point. And this is why we think kind of putting it to the providers to be as transparent as they can do, and say, when we say this is what we mean, is a good start for us.
Oh, I also want to say to no, now I just completely lost my train of thought. I'll think of it later, probably. Oh, that we really relied on the literature, that there were dozens and dozens of scholarly articles and books that many of us use to come up with these definitions and our philosophy. So it really wasn't just off the top of our heads.
One of the points that you made, Tracy, that really is important, and something that when I've spoken about this project has to do with the subjectivity and how all assessment is in some ways subjective, regardless of the data that you're using to back it up. So could you talk a little bit more about that?
I guess how to say it really depends on your point of view, right? And also sort of impact is subjective. It's all relative, right, to how you compare yourself to other researchers in your field. And we can even look at sort of a metric like the impact factor, right? And depending on what field you're in, the number means something completely different. But how librarians look at, say, an impactful piece of work might be different than how funders or promotion and tenure committees look at it. So that's part of why we develop the personas. But again, I mean, what's impactful? I mean, what's impactful in the short term versus the long term? I mean, is 2,500 newspaper article mentions of a paper impactful? What if it's a retracted paper and those are all negative mentions? So it's more important to have context. I hope that answers your question some.
Any thoughts, Greg? Stuart?
Pass.
Yeah. Again, William.
No, that's finished.
No, it was just another theme in the conversations that I've had over the years about this project was that this project, as well as the impact factor and other forms of assessment, should never be used as strictly, you're looking for the number on how to assess a scholar's output or a project's effectiveness, because no one number is ever going to capture the various ways in which you can look at and assess impact. It is nuanced, and we're not trying to create the ultimate number. We're not trying to, displace the impact factor or other means of assessing impact. That we're trying to add flavor and nuance to the conversation in a meaningful way.
I would say it's even more than flavor and nuance. We're trying to add meaning. So just getting a number or the donut or whatever the symbol, the markers are today, people don't understand what that means. I mean, certainly I've talked to lots and lots of provosts and vice chancellors and folks of that ilk, and I mean, they have a vague understanding of altmetrics as a concept, but if I said, well, here's my score, it's completely meaningless. And so the first step is to provide a framework, a lattice by which if they're intellectually curious, they can figure out what the heck this translates into, for their own frame of reference. So I mean, I think it's really foundational at its heart.
So that's kind of what I wanted to ask a little bit about. So the carrot, as it were, for Mendeley, or me as a provider, to go back to my team and say, hey, this is what NISO has come up with as a code of conduct for a data provider. These are some things that we should do to make our data more trustworthy. But we're actually not hearing a lot of people say, hey, actually, we don't really trust your data that much. And so I would like some thoughts from the committee at large. Or like, what is it that I should be going back to my folks and saying that this standard actually is going to help us with? Because we're not quite at the level where this data is is considered untrustworthy, and that might well be because it's not considered that valuable to begin with. So, I mean, are there more kinds of value that could come out of this that
I think you
aren't
hit it
being
exactly, and
discussed?
it harkens back to what I said. I think within this room, people value altmetrics. Outside this room, people don't care, by and large. That'll change. It is changing, right? The needle is moving. And once it moves, and once people start caring, the question they're going to ask is this trustworthy? What am I looking at? How does this compare to this other thing? And if you are demonstrably a good actor, and you can, in effect, show your math, that's going to matter.
I just want to say, what we're not trying to do is it's not, the code of conduct isn't saying that the data isn't trustworthy. This is the biggest thing, maybe to get across on this, is that it's not that the data isn't trusted. It's about raising the trust higher through transparency, okay, and understanding about what the methodology is behind it. One of the questions as well is that, if there is a change in the methodology, please make that public, so that when we were looking at it 6 months ago, it was doing this, and if the numbers are then shifted because there's a change in methodology somewhere, which you've done for a good reason, then that is documented, and it's there for people to be able to see, to understand where that is. Because we all know that by changing the dials a bit, we can get the same activity to change into some different numbers. So it's about the transparency, not trusting the numbers, it's about understanding how it works.
Yeah, I'm still not sure we're at that point, though. Like, so,
Yep.
what I think I need help with is a way to go back to my team and say, this is the reason we should do these things. But beyond the, obviously, like, I could say, well, people will, they want to know we're not, messing with the data behind the scenes for various reasons. But, there, is a large Berlin-based company that makes these metrics that hasn't been part of any of these discussions, and they seem to be doing just fine,
Yeah.
right? So, like, how do we position ourselves relative to them? And might there be some role for those of us who are agreeing to participate in this to, I guess, do, some shared effort to co-promote each other in this?
And that's possibly where, these others, how I've worked with other industry groups and where we've developed and helped to work with standards to raise these things, is sometimes the industry looks to say, you know what, if there's enough value, so this, at the moment it's being put together by saying, look, altmetrics are being used more. We want people to understand them. We think there's going to demand. It may not quite be there yet, but it's changing quickly. And in a year's time, if we're putting more value on it, they might want to do it. So we're laying the groundwork on this, and this is why we're on that growth curve, hopefully. But the thing there is, if the community says we want to support that, maybe they'll support something like a kite mark. Just the fact that you've put it up there, saying we're going to show the workings here. Okay? And for those that maybe aren't doing it, it's up to yourselves to ask that question about what you think about it. So it may not be the right time. But what we hopefully do is give a groundwork for when it does come to that. Actually, the industry is kind of ready for it. These are some of the questions you've got. And just for your internal staff, that hopefully actually what it might do is avoid some of the questions of people turning around saying, actually, can you tell me actually exactly how you do it? And you get that phone call every week, somebody else going, what does this mean? You've actually said, well, this is the framework that the industry says we should be providing, so we're kind of going to lay it out there on the table.
Go ahead.
Hi, Pete Ciafetti from Alexander Street. It seems that the definitions I'm seeing of altmetrics are those user engagements that are happening in large public open systems, and you're calling them data providers that may not be part of our sphere, but there's a lot of user engagement going on inside of what are effectively now closed systems, and so I'm wondering if there's any expectation. Is that kind of engagement just not an altmetric and so you're not concerned about it? Or are you imagining that publishers are going to open up their systems to data mining so that the user engagement happening in there is also part of the overall gathering?
Can you give us an example of the kind of event that you're talking about?
And within our system, people can make playlists and make them shareable across all the other users of the system. So there's some engagement going on, and somebody like a scholar or a faculty member might make a playlist that's used in a course or something, and so we can see that the request is coming from a learning management system. So there's some engagement going on there. But both systems are closed. Our system, you have to have a login to get into it. There's not a data mining API that like what you have in Twitter. Same with the learning management system, which have the user engagement on the other side. They're not providing data access points that says there was some engagement going on there. So it's like the deep dark web, you know. It's still engagement, but it's not the kind that you get in Twitter and Facebook.
I think you're right, Peter. The thing again there is that, you know, it's not there to say you've got to do this. You can't do what you want to do unless you do this. But when you get to the stage maybe that, you know, we want to share this more, we want to promote it more, it maybe even helps give you a structure about what are the questions you might need to answer as you're developing it.
That's exactly right.
And so even actually it'll hopefully help you as a publisher to say, these are the questions we might get, these are the things we want to understand.
So,
It seems like up to this point, Counter has always been from the publisher's perspective, right? So now Altmetrics is like this, what's going on outside the publisher space. And so maybe they complement each other and cancel each other out in terms of one doesn't have to do what the other does. But it didn't seem like it was going that way.
I think it's going to be one of those ones which would be fascinating to see how people adopt it and how they use it. Yes. Don't know.
well,
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think we're out of time, but you're asking
Yes.
some great questions, and so I think you have all of our contact information.
No,
and
exactly.
Todd's going to make sure that you have a link to the documents, and so please, like, write to us and come talk to us, and this is
Yes.
great stuff.
yes, absolutely. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you again to the panel.
Thank you.